Just like to offer a big shout out to Touchdown Digital, the sponsor of this week's video. Well, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Len Sumley and you're watching Sniper Photography. So good to have you all here. Today I want to talk to you about a subject which I think is very important. I don't see many people talking about this particular subject, and that subject is allowing the image to breathe, then allowing the image to tell its story or allow the image to talk. Now, what I mean by this is that there's a lot of negative space that must surround a particular image or particular subject to create that image. Now, I'm not talking about portrait photography or anything where you need to frame the face very closely or you need to get close to your subject. I'm talking about landscape photography, especially when you're photographing buildings and old buildings and things like that. Now I'm going to show you a few images which basically this is where I've used the allow the image to breathe process, and in turn that enables the image to tell its story. So what do I mean by this? Well, before I talk to you about that, the images that you'll see during this video and at the end of this video, this is the start of a 2-year photography project that I'm undertaking throughout rural New South Wales, and it's going into a publication or a book that I'm putting together on this particular or these particular parts of New South Wales. And it contains, or it will contain, rural buildings, disused farm sheds, feedlot sheds, abandoned churches, which you'll see here, and various things like that. I think you get the picture, so to speak. So it's a 2-year process, and it will encompass many, many kilometres, many sleepless nights, many early rises and late finishes. But I've heavily invested in this. So I'll be travelling throughout regional New South Wales, very close to home, and then moving southwest, west and northwest. As I said, it's a 2-year project. I'm into about 3 months into it now, and I'm starting to correlate some really, really nice images for this particular book. I haven't got a name for the book yet. That is being discussed as I'm doing this video today. So I'll get started with the first image. Now, if you have a look at this church is a disused church, or it's not being used anymore. Now, as you can see, I have a lot of space around the image. And the reason being is to let the image breathe and to let the image tell its story. Now, as you can see, that this church is obviously abandoned through the condition of it. But as you can also see where it's situated in a paddock on a farm or a part of a farm. Now, if I had focused or cropped in too tight, I'm not allowing the image to breathe. And then in turn, it wouldn't be able to tell its story. You wouldn't know where the old church is located. And I'm not talking about exact location, I'm talking about where it's located in its position. And in this case, it's positioned in a paddock on part of a farm or farming land. So I've allowed negative space. Now, you often hear people talk about negative space, and negative space can be good in one term and bad in another. In this instance, when you're trying to let your image breathe, you've got to use negative space. Now, there's a bit of a question that has to be asked here. When do you crop that image? Do you crop it before you take the photograph and do it in camera, which I suggest you do, or you crop it later on in your editing software such as Lightroom? Now, keeping in mind, when you crop an image in your editing software, you are deleting information, and it's information that you might need for further editing. So what I suggest you do is to crop in the camera. Now, it's also very important to understand what to leave out, but it's also very important what to leave in. So you've got to take your time with this, and you've got to think. This makes you think before you press that shutter button. So if you have a look at the church once again, you will see what I'm talking about. I've left room either side. Then there's this one of the same church at a different angle. Once again, I've left a lot of space around it to tell its story and also let it breathe. So it's very, very important that you let the image breathe so it can tell its story. Check this one out. I took this a few days ago. This was a very difficult shot to obtain because usually I have barbed wire fences in front of me and electrified fences. That's to keep the cattle in or horses in and people out. So I was on a sloping site. So the tripod was on a slope. Now my tripods go to 2.1 metres without a centre column. I don't use centre columns. I don't like them. You've only got to check out previous videos that I've mentioned centre columns, that they're a useless piece of stuff on a tripod. But raising the tripod to 2.1 metres, now I'm a fairly tall man, it was a bit too tall for me. I couldn't see the back of the camera or the live view screen. So what I did, I stood on a step ladder. That's right, I carry a ladder with me to clear the fence, but to also clear that foreground so I could create space and let the image breathe. So as you can see now, basically, as you can see that this image, or this particular rundown, disbanded farmhouse, this little cottage, is actually in another paddock. So, but once again, if I had cropped in too tight, it wouldn't have that effect. In actual fact, the image would have failed. Now this was taken at 155 millimeters because I was a fair way back. So it was a matter of getting the zooming right because I couldn't move. I couldn't go under the property. I never go under private land. But as you can see, by standing on a step ladder and raising the tripod to 2.1 metres, I was able to clear the grass and focus on this beautiful old disbanded structure. But once again, I've given it room to breathe. We're talking about around the subject, okay? And then it's you're enabling then the image or the old disused house to tell its story. Hey, look at me, this is where I am. So it's very, very important that you look at your subject, especially if you're photographing these type of things. In the book that I'm putting together, each page will have a couple of paragraphs pertaining to each image. And the book that I'm having produced or making, it's not a book on settings or it's more about technique and feeling and emotion. I find that photography has very little to do with the equipment you use. It's more about technique and emotion and your skill level to work with what you've got. So allowing the image to breathe and letting it tell its story is another part of, it's another part of your education towards being a good photographer and producing compelling images. So once again, I'll show you this one here. Once again, this was taken very early in the morning, and once again, plenty of negative space. You use the negative space to create the breathing or the breathing area of the image. Let the image breathe, if you can understand what I'm saying there. And then that enables the image to tell its story. Hey, look at me. I'm here. I'm in this paddock, in amongst long grass, trees, whatever the case may be. But in some forms of photography, it doesn't pay to zoom in very close. I'm not talking about macro photography, not talking about portrait photography. We're talking about landscape photography that encompasses a rather large subject, such as an old house or an old church. So it's good to either step back or zoom back and allow it to breathe so it can tell its story. So that's just a quick video there. I'll put some more images at the end of this video. Thank you for joining me today here at Sniper Photography. Love your comments. I get some really great comments on my videos, and I really appreciate the support and your time that you put in watching these videos. I love teaching photography, and this is what this channel is about. So leave your thoughts or comments down below. I'd love to read them, love to see them, and I'd get back to you as soon as I can. So please enjoy these images and keep a lookout for this book. It is a work in progress. It's going to take me a long time, but it's going to be really well worth it. So until next time, my name's Glenn Samuel. Thank you for watching Sniper Photography. And as I always say, be nice to yourself, family and friends, but most of all, you keep shooting, keep smiling. Bye for now.